June 10, 1940, German troops moved past the Somme. The French armies are in disarray. Declared an open city, Paris falls on June 14th. The German advancement is dazzling. Fleeing the terrible breakthrough, 2 million Parisians take the path of exodus. In these columns, we find a chaotic crowd, moving towards the unknown. Families carrying their children at arm's length, supporting the elderly. Carrying away few goods of value they were able to gather. However, the coming of the Germans is not bad news for everyone. Going against this human tide, 3 men are heading for the capital. 2 of them are German spies. The third is French. His name is Henri Chamberlin. He's a criminal. A thug. In just under a year, he will be one of the leaders of the Gestapo in Paris under the name Henri Lafont. A special kind of police in which we find the most dangerous criminals at the time. Arrest of Jews and patriots, trafficking, robberies, tortures, murders. It's June 1940, the criminal world has chosen its side.
Henri Lafont, godfather of the Gestapo. Who is Henri Lafont? He was born in 1902 in the 13th district in Paris. He was a poor kid. He had an unhappy childhood, which drove him quite unavoidably to petty crime. He was obviously very quickly noticed by the police, who took him to a penal colony, where stayed till he reached adulthood. Henri Lafont, during the French downfall, at 38 years old, spent nearly half of his life locked up in a penal colony or in prison, and he was just detained during the time that the Republic fell. During that time the German armies were pushing down hard on the French front. At that time, he was in prison in Paris. As the German troops progressed further into the territory, the prisoners were released from their cells. In June 1940, he was detained along with German spies, what we call the Fifth Column. They were German spies who infiltrated France, with whom he will escape. And that's when his life is going to change. Because he who was just a petty thief per se, a small crook condemned to marginality, to endure a life, without relief after all. This encounter that he had with the German agents will completely change everything, since they're going back to Paris with these agents. He'll be the guide, he's from the area, he is the French who will help them move up to the capital to join the new masters of Paris. These people are going to introduce him to their superiors. It's from here that he's going to become a German agent.
The Gestapo is the Reich security police that will, over time, take a political police function, you could say. And this said political police will be in charge of the repression of any and all forces which threaten the internal security of the Reich.
There are not enough Germans in France to hold this country without the use of helpers recruited locally. That's what Hitler theorized in Mein Kampf under the expression of indigenous participation. These relays, of course, we will find them with people who are ready to give themselves in, to become traitors, who have no other country other than that of money. And, of course, those in the middle fit this profile quite well. They are not political people, they are people who act just for themselves or their group. They live on the fringes of society, they don't share the destiny of their fellow citizens. At the start, they put themselves as enemies of society. Obviously, moving from enemy to traitor of the society, finally, the step is easily made for these people who are not stifled by morality.
He goes to work with them, make proposals to them. His proposal was quite simple. He would be a whistleblower, be provocative, and partake in entryism. What's interesting is that he would offer to the Germans, little thugs. I saw lots of them in prison. These are people who were serving a life sentence or very heavy sentences. If you gave them some power and especially the grounds to make a little bit of a profit here and there, they would become your loyal servants.
July 1940, he finished his first month since he started working for the Germans. He showed up at the Fressens prison, demanding the release of a certain number of prisoners, and in a very extraordinary way. It's a paradox, which is explained by the spirit of the times. The prison administration was not against this approach, which was not an official procedure and wasn't supported by the Germans and which was done amicably. Lafont arrived at the Fressens prison, he presented a police card and was accompanied by 2 German NCOs. Then, he demanded that prisoners be released. Among these 30 prisoners were cowards, people who formed what we could call the base of the lower criminal world. Little crooks. However, they were very interesting. These people, once spread around Paris, would be able to bring to the boss to the one who was now acting as the chief, Henri Lafont, in all cases, and then they would be his ears and eyes. In bars, they would be able to report the information to him. Jean Rossi. Pimp, racketeer. Kazaba, known as Dakes. Bar owner, forger, pimp. Chave, known as Hot Nose. Burglar, trafficker. Estebetegi, known as the Basque. Pimp, scavenger, burglar. To become what the Germans called a V-man, a man you can trust. You had to prove your commitment to the Nazi cause. Lafont is not a Nazi. He is just an opportunist. However, if he wanted to benefit from the German kindness, he had to show his commitment in the war on their side. This is right after the episode of the liberation of Fressens. The German top officials in the capital were not happy with it because Lafont once again had not been authorized to do so. This was the German army, officers in the Prussian tradition, who respected a certain order. And Lafont, at that time, in July 40, was on the verge of being arrested, and he was informed that the Germans would like to apprehend a service manager in the Belgian intelligence agency, Lambrecht, who took refuge in France in the Free Zone, out of their reach. Adrien Estebetegi, known as the Basque, that he released, who lived in Bordeaux for a long time and had big connections in Toulouse. Toulouse, which is exactly the city where Lambrecht took refuge, the story seems implausible. Lafont was simply raiding. He took his car, went to Toulouse, learned from members of the local area, where Lambrecht is hiding. He knocks at his door and then knocks him out. He puts him in his trunk and goes back to Paris. It's as simple as that. It's amazing. But things seem to have gone well that way. For the Germans, the impact was exactly the one that you can feel while listening to this story. They couldn't believe it. Lambrecht's arrest had 2 consequences. The first for Lafont, who undoubtedly became an interesting character in the eyes of the German top hierarchy, who said, "Hey, we have someone who is practical." And above all, the most important dramatic consequence was for Lambrecht and for the Belgian intelligence services. Lambrecht was mistreated and was going to be deported. And his arrest led to the arrest of dozens, or maybe even 100 members of the Belgian intelligence networks across Europe. We can see the harm of a man like Lafont through this dramatic story. We see a man who can do such harm.
Here is France News. Every news concerning France and the Empire. Around Marshal Pétain, the country lives again. It developed a new spirit, not forgetting the lost tradition, the continuity of its history. In front of the chief, thousands of legionaries lifted their hands for the oath, whose simplicity increases its greatness. when countless voices would say, "We swear to serve France and achieve." It is Pétain who would say, accepting again the heavy responsibility which he upheld without weakness, "I renew my oath myself, with you."
Great declarations, the oaths masked a painful reality. In the shadow of ancient heroes, a new system was blossoming. Seats are free for those who agree to collaborate. The French community is getting ready to witness some of its best years. For Lafont and his accomplices, it was time for power, it was a time of impunity.
It is true that the Germans would behave extremely harsh, but all these people or leaders were doctors in law, in philosophy. They had some kind of insane respect, to the point of disgust, to the law. And so you couldn't do anything stupid. The attacks against synagogues, assassinations, etc. From entryism in resistance networks, they would fill parallel pharmacies. That's how the Gestapo of Lauriston Street was put in place, and it differs from all the other Gestapo. Not by its violence, not for the sake of profit, not by the villainy of the people who made it up, but by the fact that, at the head of this pharmacy located in 93 Lauriston Street, was a crook, Chamberlin, Lafont as well as a policeman. And not just any policeman. His name was Bonny. And that Bonny was present during the Stavisky case. He was named the first police officer from France.
1934, the swindler Alexander Stavisky embezzled 200 million francs from the Crédit Municipal de Bayonne. The scandal became a state affair, and February 6th, the fascist leagues marched on the assembly. It was Inspector Bonny who, when collecting evidence, allowed the investigation to progress and calmed the people. To him, it was a moment of glory.
Bonny was corrupt. Few does exist in the police force. He was dismissed, and so he set up, like most of his dismissed colleagues, a specialized private police office, which specialized in provocation, divorce, adultery, etc. To him, it was his marshal's baton. And Bonny was a good cop. He was corrupt, but he was a good cop. And he brought to the Gestapo from Lauriston Street an efficiency that no other Gestapo had.
The Germans had a plan. When they introduced Lafont to Bonny, they had a plan. The idea was to link, on the one hand, the predator instinct of Lafont, the thug who had connections in the field, who showed his allegiance to the new masters of Paris, and on the other side, rigor of the administrator, the investigator. Bonny is the man who would create records, who would create an alphanumeric file, who would take care of all stewardship from the house on Lauriston Street. He took care of the Lauriston Street cash register. He also participated in the questionings. He was very good at questioning, he was trained for that. This encounter between Bonny and Lafont is wanted, supported, and encouraged by the Germans, so much so that they formed a binomial. Moreover, they went down in history under the name Bonny-Lafont Group. The Gestapo in Lauriston, Carling, was also called the Bonny-Lafont Group, even if Bonny was only Lafont's second in command and would forever be. The recruitment of members of the Lauriston Street gang continued throughout that period. Lafont recruited all the talents that came his way. We saw a rise in power. He was recruiting more and more threatening people, worrisome, real enemies of society, in the sense that we then gave to this expression. A few of the talents should be mentioned. Abel Danos, also known as the Mammoth, the Handsome Abel, Bibil, and Buffalo Bill. His nicknames tell a story. The Mammoth means he's a strong man, Buffalo Bill means he's shooting all the time. He was always armed. A police note introduces him as extremely dangerous, still armed. Don't apprehend him, wait for reinforcements. He was a very dangerous person and was already a legend in the business. He was a close friend of Pierre Loutrel, who will enter the story of the great banditry under the nickname Pierrot le Fou. He knows Joe Attia, the future king of dismissal. He knows Georges Boucher-Saint-Tiche intimately, Fat Joe said. He is obviously a friend of Émile Bouisson, says the elusive, who is going to become public enemy number one. With Abel Danos, we are right away in the very high mobocracy. And we are immediately in this middle cream. Another very important character who will return to Lauriston Street is an absolutely considerable character who is called Jean Sartol, known as Jean Le Chauve, who is considered by the police report of the time as being a lord of the environment. That is to say, this man has reached a level of recognition in the community, which makes him one of its leaders. He is considered to be one of the 10 biggest thugs of his time. Jean Sartol, of course, like all thugs, learns that something is happening, Lauriston Street, that there is a chef who can fix things, and he's going to put at the service of this structure, to simply be able to develop his own traffic, by reversing, of course, the tax that we owe to the boss, that he owes to Lafont.
Le lendemain, je l'ai retrouvé rue Lauriston. C'est lui.
Qui, lui?
En uniforme.
Tu m'as pas dit qu'il était boche.
Mais il l'est pas, il aime se loquer comme ça pour impressionner l'adversaire, c'est tout.
Je passe l'éponge. Tu viens avec l'oseille, on efface tout. Regarde-moi quand je te cause. Mais si t'essaies encore de me doubler...
Merci, patron, mais c'était juste...
Un malentendu, je sais. Ta gueule.
T'es arrivé là de chez la mamie?
Passe à la caisse dans la semaine. Sinon, c'est toi qu'on efface. Dégage.
Les tableaux. Les tableaux.
Il est bien luné, on y va. Patron, pardon, je voudrais vous présenter un copain, un très bon copain. Léon Jabinet. Léo pour les dames. On a partagé la même cellule à Fresnes il n'y a pas si longtemps.
T'étais tombé pourquoi?
C'est un violent. On dirait pas comme ça, mais il connaît pas sa force. En plus, il est un peu fêlé. Présentement, il est dans la panade.
Ah bah tu connais le tarif. C'est 40 000 balles.
So what is it to be a Gestapist from Lauriston Street? It means first of all to have what we call in the middle slang the cardboard. It's an Ausweis, very particular, on which it is written that the owner of this card should not be worried under any circumstances not only by the German authorities, but that he can even requisition them at his request. That is to say, he can get help from the Germans, whether they are policemen, soldiers or others. It is secondly, the possibility in a country where they no longer exist. Even the German police sometimes are in short supply. There is no gas left to have cars and gas without a problem. And then it's the possibility to have weapons. Modern weapons, Schmeisser submachine guns, if not a Beretta. On the flip side, we have the official police officers. What about them? They are out of gas for their cars. They are armed with 6.35, Le Francais or Manafrance, with a range of 10 meters. And then they are like all French people. They are full of fear. When it's not of terror, in front of people who even say with a Corsican accent, German police, Gestapo.
Now they can go burglarize. It will be a search. They will be able to go flying. It will be a seizure. They can go racketeering. It will simply be a bet to an almost official fine, as if a report had been drawn up. We are here in an inversion of values, which corresponds more generally in times of war, during moral collapse.
From the Arctic Ocean all the way to the Black Sea, either on a bottom of nearly 3,000 kilometers, the German forces took up position. The fight for defense of the West is engaged. The biggest offensive that has been ever conducted over the course of history has begun. Soon, despite the resistance of 160 Red Army divisions, boundaries are based on all points.
In France too, the war continues. A secret war in which traitors are in the spotlight. For Lafont, it's triumph time. Dominator, he knows how to be obeyed, feared and respected. His audacity and charisma, are going to allow him to get closer to power.
Lafont, this little thug, becomes one of the most influential figures in France. Because he has connections with the most senior German officers, Lafont becomes someone important. It's a great payback for him. He who knew a pretty miserable life until 40, becomes a man who powerful people want to know. It's absolutely incredible when you think about it. He frequents Laval the tutorial. He frequents Bousquet, the Secretary General of the police. He is seeing Amédée Boussière, the Prefect of Police. And all these people, why do they go to Lafont? Sometimes it's trivial, it's because Lafont can find food for them, it's as simple as that. For example, Karl Bommelberg, the head of the Gestapo in France, gets to Lafont to eat. Nocken accepts gifts from Lafont. Nocken, who is number 2 of the German security police in France, one of the most powerful characters on our territory at that time. Gifts are delivered regularly, he gets some cash. Laval comes to him to obtain the release of 2 people, that's for sure. Because Lafont's ultimate goal is to break free from German tutelage. To be the most independent possible in his activity, by providing services and by demonstrating his power. Even if it is just temporary, he shows the interest in getting to know him, and the interest in leaving it in that position. We are in a moment in the history of France, in this changeover, who authorizes these reconciliations, authorizes that a thug, to rub shoulders with the President of the Council. It's lamentable, but it's obviously one lessons from this period as well. We are witnessing a total inversion of values. Where are values in all of this? We need to portray this system. The armistice that was signed by the French and German authorities anticipated that France would deliver a certain number of goods. There were quotas that were set, and such, in addition. France pays, for occupancy costs, absolutely extravagant amounts, unusually extravagant. That did not match to any economic reality, since France had to pay 20 million Reichsmark per day, for occupancy costs. 20 million Reichsmark, that's 400 million francs. The Germans will very quickly be tempted to speculate on this money, by injecting it back into the French economics canals to get in return, goods that will allow Germany, to make its economy work at full speed of war, since we are in a total war. To do this, they need to find the stocks, and they also have to offer attractive rates for sellers to come to them and offer them their goods. The black market that we describe, and that the Germans themselves were fighting, they are almost the instigators.
The Germans are going to use these parallel circuits, thanks to the considerable sums that they have, to seize national wealth. National wealth that are non-ferrous metals to wine. And in this galaxy, you're going to have what we call purchasing officers, which have a semi-official existence, that are fed by these resources, sometimes official, sometimes unofficial, and that allows Germany to buy enormously on the French market, which also guarantees very juicy intermediaries' margins.
By intervening in these processes, French Gestapo agents are going to prove to be excellent traders. Worrisome intermediaries ready for the worst, voracious predators on the prowl of good opportunities. For them, it's business time, dubious markets, and easy money.
The role given to the Lafont Group, firstly, is to secure these transactions, because we're here in a slightly grey universe, full of traffickers, who may be tempted to swindle the occupation authorities. Second, their action will move towards trade as such. They are going to ask to go look for stocks, and to find stocks and intercalate as an intermediary in these traffics, between a seller who sometimes does not want to sell. But Lafont can be very convincing. A seller, and then the final buyer, who are the occupation authorities. These are very simple traffics, because in purchasing offices, they don't ask the seller for anything, neither his identity, nor the origin of the goods. So we imagine all the wildlife that is attracted by such simple traffic. No down payment, no stock, it's a recipe for fortune.
At the end of the year, Souls Charities think of the underprivileged. and in the Halles district, they are given free soup. Here, those who are hungry will find a substantial meal, and also a bit of moral comfort.
At that time, the queues get longer in front of the shops. Goods are becoming scarce. Food is complicated to get. The French have to go through the black market, and at the same time, these Gestapo are islands of prosperity. In the midst of this misery, these groups of French people who worked for the Germans, and, of course, first and foremost, the Lauriston Street Group, live in great opulence. It's an absolutely wonderful era for these people. They're having a feast, while the others die of hunger. On Lauriston Street, they're having party after party. Champagne is flowing. We are here, in an idea of catching up. These people who were thugs, the proscribed, the relegable, people condemned to marginality, finally in one fell swoop, do pretty much anything they want. Lafont multiplies the adventures. He has adventures with some of the most beautiful women from Paris at the time, a few models, especially from Schiaparelli or Chanel. There are also stars in the circle of Corinne Lucher, who bring stars with them on Lauriston Street. The artists get into Lauriston Street. They have banquets. Tino Rossi is there. That doesn't make him a collaborator, but someone who participates very slightly and no doubt, without fully realizing of the seriousness of things, or the danger of the people he frequent, but who participates, of this system of perpetual feasts. Cabarets are open, working very well under the occupation. They are reserved for a certain clientele who are German collaborators or officers. Brothels are spinning also at full speed. Lafont and his men frequent them, when they are not illegal owners. Pigalle and Montmartre cabarets come under Lafont's control.
Avec un ou deux petits hop là, si vous voulez savoir ce que mon cœur pense ce soir, en chantant comme ça, timba poum pala, c'est notre histoire.
These years are, for these men from Lauriston Street, years that can be summed in the following way. In the evening, we celebrate, we have fun. And during the day, we sell goods or men to the Germans. However, you need to be aware of the importance of these activities. Jean Sartol, the crook, says Jean Laborde, recognized post-war to have participated in the looting, more than 1,000 apartments, in 3 years. We're almost one apartment away per day, including Sundays. This man is going to celebrate his 100th million francs in 43. He's going to have a big party where he invites all his Gestapo friends, and a few German officials to celebrate his 100th million francs collected. There, we are nevertheless aware of fortunes that are made in impunity, in which these fortunes are made while they are, obviously, totally illegal in origin. Not even illegal, immoral. And of course, to be able to do business with the Germans, you also have to do repression for their services. And so there is a kind of balance, that is in the Gestapo French and of course Rue Lauriston, between commercial affairs and repression, and sometimes everything gets mixed up. We can do commercial business and repression. When are we going to stop Allied agents parachuted in? Generally, they have big amounts of money on them. They get them back at that moment. When they visit the home of a rich Jew within the framework of the anti-Semitic policy, followed by the occupier at the time, everything is taken from the house to the power sockets. This system holds up well. It is highly effective, because these agents ultimately cost them nothing. They have dozens of French people at their service in the French Gestapo that don't cost them a dime. These agents feed on the beast. When they arrested someone, they stripped him. They are wolves. And these wolves, the Germans, put on a leash for them, they make them watchdogs.
This pack was going to hunt down the resistors, harass Jews. Gangsters become police officers. Strange police officers intervening out of control. Intimidation, abuse of power, violence. It is the period of repression.
Torture has always been used as a means in Lauriston Street, to force people to keep silent. It was a torture that was not particularly elaborate. It was beatings with batons, with fists, or with feet, or caning. Sometimes torture with the use of water. They took the prisoner and plunged him into a bathtub, generally filled with water mixed with garbage. It's also part of the process of humiliating the victims and keeping them under the way of the water until they're suffocated. It's extremely taxing for the person who is on the receiving end. And in general, they would often end up losing consciousness. To wake the prisoners up, they would pour a mixture of soap and gasoline into their mouth through their teeth. Faced with my obstinacy not to confess, I was taken to the bathroom. They tortured me for an hour and a half. As my testimony was deemed insufficient, they put me through for a second session the next morning. We are in a torture pattern, which constantly keeps multiplying and reaching heights that are terrifying, extremely shocking. Some French prisoners explained, after being arrested by the men of Lafont and then having been handed over to the German authorities, where they were treated better by the Germans, only by the French in the Gestapo.
One of the phenomena of torture is, first of all, this kind of degradation of being. What was the Gestapo looking for? Initially, they wanted to obtain confessions, because they were extremely formalistic and picky. They needed written confessions, recorded, noted, and then expeditious justice could pass, but only after confessions. Confessions no matter what. One wants to torture to get information, but I think that in the case of the Gestapo, it was much worse. It was a kind of a sadistic desire to do harm.
Lauriston Street has excelled in wrestling against French networks. So, they introduce intrism in these networks. And people are obviously going to betray the organization they have penetrated. To take down very well-known networks, the Alliance suffered over 400 arrests. Marco Polo, which is a resistance group, it's a resistance that is very closely linked to London, fell several times. Marco Polo's staff fell 3 times. The French defense also suffered arrests and huge falls, with the most iconic being Geneviève de Gaulle, who, by the way, was arrested by Bonny himself.
Germans have always been very vigilant with respect to propaganda issues. It's because they take the underground press seriously, that Defense of France, which is one of the most important newspapers of captive France, is in their sights. You're going to have a police hunt. That is to say that individuals are going to be arrested either at their homes or at their place of work. Men from the Bonny Lafont group will be sent to Rue Bonaparte, to a bookstore called the Vow of Louis XIII. A bookstore which is the main post of the resistance movement. That is, where they file and receive instructions, and etc.
I had small papers in an envelope to drop off. I took my dad's bike. I left quietly. I placed my bike close to the bookstore. And then I said to myself, that's odd. The door is not closed as usual. I don't exactly recall the details anymore. I said to myself, should I go in or not? If I am afraid because of the state of a door, then it's not worth it to try and keep doing stuff like this anymore. I either do it or don't do it, and I already started, so I have to do it. I opened the door and then someone jumped at me. I don't know if it was Bonny or Lafont, but there were 2 men there. And they took me directly to the back room.
What was the result of this operation? Some 50 members were arrested, 25 were arrested at the vow of Louis XIII and the other half at their workplace or at home.
I spent the night of July 20th, 1943 in prison, in Fressens, and I didn't get out until around January 20th, 1944. And then I got on a train directly to Grunwald. From there, I left for another location in Austria.
My dear friends, for the fourth time, France celebrates in trial and sadness a Christmas of war. Christmas, Nativity Day. As death looms over the entire world, and France suffers every day the cruel ordeal, new crimes, and the immense misery of the bombings. Despite so many disasters, I keep my faith in the future of France. Once again, I ask you to think above all, at the risk of death that our country was facing, if it were to fall into a hideous civil war.
Incantations won't help. The bad wind feared by Pétain is blowing stronger every day on France. The scrubland are swelling, resistance is growing. Lafont, the vulture, imagines himself as an eagle. The thug usually dreams.
At the end of 43, the buying office system loses its effectiveness, loses its meaning, and becomes less profitable for Germans. A tipping point is observed. Many of these accredited who so far were sometimes repressed, sometimes in commercial, are going to switch to an activity more specifically repressive, that is, to carry out very concretely assaults against resistance movements.
Colonel Knochen, notre ami Lafont, qui a l'énergie et l'expérience propres à vaincre dans ce genre de lutte, propose de mettre sur pied une brigade composée d'ex-tirailleurs nord-africains, équipés et entraînés par ce soin, avec pour mission ramener le calme et l'ordre dans les campagnes.
Notre seul objectif est la libre circulation de nos troupes afin de permettre le prélèvement de ce qui est nécessaire à notre intendance et aux besoins du peuple allemand. Cher ami Lafont, si dans, disons, 3 mois, l'exode sud n'est pas sûr, nous appliquerons aux paysans français le régime que nous appliquons aux moujiks en Russie. Et ça, c'est clair?
Tout à fait, colonel. Allez, bois un coup, c'est du bon. Te casse pas la tête avec ça, je vais m'en occuper.
Lafont has taken a liking to power. He is a head of the department, a feared and respected police officer. He has another desire. He has the desire to become a warlord. He has a big idea at the end of the year 1943. He has the idea of mobilizing, or rather incorporating, the North African prisoners that the Germans have been detaining since 1940 in an army corps. He definitely has that ambition. And of course the Germans do finally welcome only positively the idea of a troop that would come secure the back of their lines. It is a poor population, poorly educated, which is essentially made up of maneuvers, day laborers, bar boys. Among them are a few supporters, a few delinquents. There are also a few assassins. It's easy to see why they get involved in the North African Brigade. It is, first and foremost, to also have a map and to be protected from police investigations. And on that occasion, they joined the Order Black and they become SS soldiers. On this occasion, Lafont obtains the rank of captain, Bonny and the 5 section chiefs become lieutenants.
For the Gestapists on Lauriston Street, with the times of the Reich's defeats comes the repression. Savage repression, without limits. They will bring distress to rebellious regions. They will brutalize, they will plunder. They will rape. It's time for massacres.
We are going to mostly talk about his activity in Carise and Dordogne, which at the beginning was an activity of pacifying the zone, will enter into a logic of terror. Failing to attack the scrubland, they will try to pacify the region through terror. Every time they intervene, they will do the same, threatening, stealing, looting, and raping, if necessary as well. Obviously, there are a lot of rapes. There is a wild horde that falls on this region. They arrested the mother. They searched my sister's house. I have not seen them since. Entered the room with a gun drawn, fired several bullets at him, kicked him in the kidneys. They are literally wallowing on civilian populations and the people they arrest. They make threats of deportation to fathers of entire families unless they give them their savings. And they have the power to do it too. We are dealing with poor populations without any protection against them. There is the case, for example, in Tulle, with Monange and another member of the North African Brigade, who assault a young man on the street for no reason. The young man was walking by, they want to arrest him, they're both drunk, and the young man resists, he doesn't want to get arrested. He gets beat up very severely, before taking a machine gun bullet to the leg. They want to force him to get up and this unfortunate man cannot get up. He gets beat up again. He will end up disabled for life, for nothing. This young man was not a resistance fighter. We follow the path of the North African Brigade, a path that is strewn with blood, screams. Fear and weighs a lot at the exit, since it is seen that there are more than 100 victims, summary executions carried out by people of the North African Brigade.
Now, France Actualite, Monday night of Tuesday 5, June 6, 1944, a historic night. The Anglo-Americans are landing on the soil of Normandy. In the night, tons of steel come crashing down on ships where the German defenses are pounding. Light units are gaining a foothold on the shore. And here comes dawn, offshore, the impressive Anglo-American fleet.
August 13, 1944, the last pieces of the brigade returned to Paris. It should be said that most were already back home. Lafont was already home, disgusted, not so much by the activity of these men, but rather disputed by the ever so clear feeling that the game was indeed lost.
The bombers, in turn, unleashed the biggest attack ever prepared in a military operation. Cities, the whole country is Covent-rated, as the Germans say. Because you should never forget that they are the ones who started it. Those who bragged about destroying everything when they thought they were the strongest.
Lafont and Bonny are going to try to escape. Their initial idea is to join Spain. Unfortunately for him, he leaves with Bonny and his children. And he's going to experience what he made others to go through. He's going to hit a control that's obviously going to confiscate his car, and he's going to ask the son of Pierre Bonny, Jacques Bonny, to return to Paris by bike to ask a friend of theirs for help. Someone they believe to be a friend of theirs. A notorious trafficker whose name is Joseph Jovanovici, a very ambiguous, very complex character, a resistant, but not really, a character all in grey. Joseph Jovanovici is going to dump his old friends, Lafont and Bonny, and the police headquarters will send men to pick them up. It's September 1944. The Lafont trial starts subsequently, as early as December 1944. All members of Lauriston Street who have been arrested are going to be taken to court. We are still only 3 months after their arrest. We are in an instruction that was done in record time. too fast, and it annoyed the forces of the police who were involved in the investigation. We feel that there has been pressure on this care, especially the French intelligence services. And public opinion wanted the leaders. The traitors had to be killed, and then we had the perfect traitors. So they are on trial and are all executed. They are 9 to be driven to the peloton of execution one morning in December 1944, end of Lauriston Street. The execution of these leaders. The French execute traitors.
At the Palace of Justice in Paris, 2 traitors were sentenced to death for giving the Germans despicable help. Lafont and Bonny, that you see in a German uniform. Traitors were sentenced to be shot by a firing squad, composed of FFR.
What a mistake to shoot these people so hastily when they had so much to tell us. They were shot as early as December 44. Can you imagine? The war went on for another 7 months. I will say that maybe we shot them all too quickly, because we didn't really want to let them say anything. Maybe there would be lies, of course. But I think that they knew a number of things. Perhaps a few celebrities who had political roles, or others under the Fourth Republic and are not entirely innocent. Vis-a-vis Lafont and the Gestapo from Lauriston Street. As for not the bystanders, because they were impressive guys, who have murders and tortures on their conscience, full of resistance networks or others, many converted after the war. The passage of war to the post-war period, for them, was done through the resistance. A large number were expecting it, and some had been hired by resistance networks for their professional specialty, including public execution in the midst of people. It can't be improvised. We needed killers. We hired killers. A certain number, thanks to this passage by the resistance, are going to evade the police and the courts in a way. And what's very interesting, it's to see that these people have developed habits of impunity, money, big cars, of efficiency, handling of weapons which are, after all, weapons of war. And they are the ones who are going to constitute the middle of the post-war years.
It is difficult not to mention the case of Auguste Ricard, who will soon be famous on the international scale, this time under the nickname of El Viejo, the Old Man. What is his role during the occupation alongside Lafont? He takes care of the teams that are racketeering pleasure establishments from Pigalle and Montmartre. Auguste Ricard passes through Spain and goes to Latin America, where, thanks to his connections in the Corsican region, is from Corsica and Marseille. He will become a central element, or at least one of the headliners of the French Connection. Of this set of networks that we called the French Connection, who are more and more being called the Corsican Connection.
These are false accusations and without proof. And an accusation without evidence can be denied without proof. I have reached the end of the war in Argentina, and immediately I started opening French restaurants. There were none. The only thing you can blame me for is to have had a clientele of drug traffickers.
Have you been convicted in France?
I was convicted at a very young age. I was 14 and a half years old. I was convicted of carrying weapons. An attempted murder.
Moreover, other former Gestapists are going to know how to recycle very well. Pierre Loutrel, known as Pierrot le Fou, will establish after the war, the day after the war, until 45 to 46, what was called the Front Pull Gang, increasing robberies, armed attacks in a very daring way. In fact, they have become legends. And who is on his team? His loved ones, friends. We meet Joe Attia, who will become one of Paris' bullies until the end of the 1950s. At the beginning of the 1960s, we find Abel Danos, the famous mammoth. We also find Georges Bouchassache, who will be an extremely important thug in the 1960s. We find in all a number of elders, maybe not directly Gestapists, but people who were very close to this structure, who have been helping out. They will be found in almost all post-war criminal associations.
Fleeing the firing squad, most French Gestapo thugs are dispersed in nature. They are found in Europe, Asia, Africa, or in the Americas. This dispersion sets the groundwork of the international crime organization. Cigarettes, drugs, guns, prostitution. They are in every traffic, mixing with intelligence, dangerously approaching the political world. They are intervening everywhere. If the leaders have been put out of harm's way in 1944, there are many pretenders ready to take over. A lot of those have passed through Lauriston Street. At Henri Lafont School, the godfather of the Gestapo.